Today we focus mainly on the Qatar strike, but also touch on the recent UN vote, update on Charlie Kirk, pop into Brazil, and then come back to Gaza and General Zini. So, did the Qatar strike succeed? Let's talk about the Qatar strike. Now that some time has passed, it seems that the strike failed completely. Or did it? And what will the enemies of Israel do in response? In the last episode, we stated that there is no proof of life or proof of success for the primary targets of the attack. In the aftermath, Israel was optimistic, but has since been very quiet, and that Hamas almost immediately claimed failure and continues to do so, but that Hamas's track record on truth and admitting the demise of its leaders indicates that their claims are irrelevant. Now, nothing has changed in this regard, and there's still no proof of success or failure. More statements from Hamas, for example, that Khalil al-Hayya visited his son's grave, and still only few statements from Israel. Although the Times of Israel reported that Netanyahu said, Hamas terrorist chiefs living in Qatar don't care about the people in Gaza. They blocked all ceasefire attempts in order to endlessly drag out the war. Getting rid of them would rid the main obstacle to releasing all our hostages and ending the war. This, of course, could indicate that Hamas leadership is still alive. Now, for the moment, let's assume that the leadership survived the attack and analyze the situation with that assumption in mind. The strikes are a complete failure. Yes and no. Obviously, when Israel approved and executed this strike, the primary goal was the elimination of the targets. But beyond that, there were secondary goals. Up until this point, the Hamas leadership has been living in the lap of luxury in the world's best hotels with billions of dollars stolen from their people in private bank accounts, feeling safe and secure while Gaza burns. Now, after this strike, I'm sure that the Hamas leaders are sleeping just a little bit less comfortably, knowing that the next time they might not be so lucky. Maybe this will move them to negotiate a little bit more to end this war. A recent report from a Gazan reporter within Gaza stated that some of the Hamas leaders in the Gaza Strip have been making personal individual deals with Israel. For example, Anwar Atalia, municipal council member of Gaza City, as well as a few other roles within Hamas, escaped through the Erez crossing to Turkey in exchange for information on the location of hostages, which resulted in the recent recovery of 2 bodies. Now, bear in mind that this report is attributed to an unnamed Gazan reporter, so it may or may not be true. But in any case, it indicates a direction where leaders, fearing for their own safety, are more willing to negotiate. Another secondary goal of the strike, which was raised generally by opponents of Netanyahu and Israel, as well as some supporters such as President Trump, was that the strike was meant to derail negotiations to end the war. And now, while this is possible, I doubt it. Since, like Yasser Arafat and the Palestinian Authority, Hamas too seems to never miss an opportunity to miss an opportunity. In other words, they have consistently rejected the deals on the table because they want a deal that is more in their favor, one that would end the war with guarantees of rebuilding Gaza and them staying in power, as well as access to their arms smuggling routes in the Philadelphia corridor and so on. So while it's possible that this was one of the reasons, I find it unlikely. Let's move on to the response of the enemies of Israel. Qatar, which I remind you, is one of the world's biggest sponsors of terror, as well as funding the Islamic invasion of Europe and America via mosques, imams, funding of DEI, Islamic and woke education and institutions, and so on, has said it will use all its diplomatic power and its alliances to strike back at Israel. It has called for an emergency meeting of Arab and Islamic countries in Doha to form a united front against Israel. Egypt has proposed to build an anti-Israel Arab NATO-like force, which it would contribute 20,000 troops to and would command. They claim that it would be defensive only so as not to get embroiled in wars that are started by other parties against Israel. France, Germany, and England released a statement condemning the strike, as have many other Western countries, of course. Turkey and Saudi Arabia also condemned the attack and expressed solidarity with Qatar and a joint regional response which they think is the right solution. Now, time will tell if this is all lip service or anything more. On the other hand, the US, while stated that they were disappointed or bothered by the strike, emphasized that Hamas needs to be destroyed and that taking out its leaders would not have been a bad thing. Secretary Marco Rubio is on his way to Israel to talk with the Israeli authorities on the subject, as well as, of course, removing the Hamas and so on and so forth, emphasizing the strength of the bond between Israel and the United States, and even stating that this strike will not shake that bond. Before moving on, please click the bell, like, subscribe, and if you have any questions or ideas, comment below, as well as share this with someone who you think would benefit from it. Let's zoom out to New York. The UN General Assembly passed a resolution formally called the New York Declaration on the Peaceful Settlement of the Question of Palestine and the Implementation of the Two-State Solution. It was sponsored by France and Saudi Arabia following a conference in July aimed at charting concrete, time-bound, irreversible steps towards a two-state solution. And the key elements of this resolution include, starting with a condemnation of Hamas for the October 7th attack, which of course gives it the ability to claim that it is fair and equal and so on and so forth. Criticism of Israel's attack on civilians and civilian infrastructure in Gaza, and of course the humanitarian crisis, siege, starvation. A call for the end of the war in Gaza. Obviously it doesn't talk about how such an end should be and so on and so forth, because there have been many options on the table to end the war. Hamas just needs to lay down its arms and release the hostages. Recommendation that Hamas must relinquish its rule in Gaza and hand over its weapons and allow the Palestinian Authority, who are also terrorists, to assume governance in line with establishing a sovereign and independent Palestinian state. Support for deploying a temporary international stabilization mission under UN auspices, since we saw how well they did in Lebanon. In any case, the vote passed 142 to 10, with 12 countries abstaining. This text, of course, is non-binding, since it's the General Assembly and not the Security Council, so it doesn't compel states legally, but is an expression of the collective political will of the world at the moment. We will see how this month continues, as in a week there is supposed to be another UN-related pro-Palestinian action, the French attempt to have multiple countries officially recognize Palestine. Let's quickly go over a couple of stories before we move back into our region. In Brazil, the pro-Israel conservative former president Jair Bolsonaro has been sentenced to 27 years in prison for an alleged revolution. Now, I haven't looked too deeply into this matter, but it is certainly another point of conflict between the global liberals and the global conservatives, without going into the intimate details of this case. But please consider praying about it and looking into the matter. Charlie Kirk, a likely suspect in the assassination, was detained. His funeral, Charlie's funeral, will be on September 21st, and President Trump, as well as close family friend Vice President J.D. Vance, will be in attendance. I don't want to go into this situation very much, but of course, pray for Erica and his 2 small children, and pray that such violent actions don't repeat themselves, and that Charlie's message of nonviolent debate spreads, as well as his strong faith in Yeshua. Coming back to our neck of the woods, the operation in Gaza continues. More buildings that are being used by Hamas are being destroyed daily. More residents are moving south to safe zones. The current count is at 250,000. A new viral post came out saying that over 600,000 Gazans have been killed, and over 360,000 of them are infants. It's crazy how such lies receive such wide circulation. I mean, let's assume that the Hamas Ministry of Health, which is of course part of their terrorist organization, and are not liars who push media warfare. Let's assume that they're telling the truth, and that their estimates of 50 to 60,000 dead are correct. If so, how could it jump 1,000% in days? It's just crazy that such lies get circulated and believed. And for the last story for today, I mentioned last episode that the 60-day court compromise delay on the government's ability to appoint, as is explicitly written in the law, the ability to appoint a new GSS, General Security Service head, has ended. The 60-day delay, that is. So on Thursday last week, the government announced that they wish to nominate General Zini and asked the Grunis Committee, whose job it is to check for any corruption among the high-level government appointments, to look into General Zini's past. The Grunis Committee responded that they will convene on Thursday this week, which is good, but also said that they will be inviting Netanyahu, former GSS head Ronen Bar, and the current temporary head, whose name is not revealed, for an interview, which is bad, as it indicates that they wish to do more than their role of checking for corruption, but also weigh in on completely unrelated aspects in the nomination process. That said, there's no doubt in my mind that this appointment will be challenged in the High Court. But as always, time will tell. For now, that is it. Please pray for Israel and for God's will to be done. Shalom.